Action. Alright, so a couple chapters ago we did factoring. You guys remember factoring?
Yeah.
So if I have like 3x squared minus 6x, do you guys remember how to factor that? Alright. Let me fix this. I think I might have already screwed it up. Uh-oh. No. Okay. Alright, do you guys know how to factor that? 3x squared minus 6x. What's the first type of factoring we learned? You should always check to do this first.
Reduce. Wait, no.
Take stuff out. What goes into both of these?
3x.
What's left after I divide that out of both of those?
X minus 2.
Okay, that was number one. There's basically three, kind of. Another thing that we learned was this. You guys know how to factor that one? Square minus a square, differences of squares.
Wait.
A square is something that has a square root. So does 4 have a square root? Yes. Does x squared have a square root? Yes. Does 49 have a square root? Yes. This is a square minus square. So you just do two sets of parentheses. What goes into 4x squared? 2x times 2x. What multiplies into negative 49? 7 and negative 7. That's how you do square minus square. So take stuff out. Square minus the square. And then we did something like this. 3-term factoring. We probably did these the most. Do you guys remember these? What goes in the front? X times x. What goes in the back is what multiplies into negative 4 that adds up to negative 3. 1 and negative 4. Okay, and so that was the easier kind of 3-term factoring. There was a harder version. Hold on, I gotta think about it for a second. That was like this with the number on front. You guys remember how this went? What goes into 2x squared? 2x times x. What goes into negative 6? 2 and negative 3, negative 3 and 2. You gotta kind of play around, see what works. I think this one is negative 3 and 2. The way you check it though is you do outside, inside of the FOIL and see if that gives you the middle term. The outside is 4x, the inside is minus 3x. That makes 1x. You guys remember that stuff? Okay, that was chapter 10. This is chapter 12. So the difference on chapter 12, this chapter, is instead of them giving you this and saying factor, they're going to give you this and say solve. So what's the difference? It's an equation. Okay? And we can figure out what x has to be to make this equation true. So on this one, the original, like chapter 10, x could be anything. You plug anything you want in. But once you turn it into an equation, there's only a couple x values that work for this. Okay? And what you have to do is factor it like this, or like one of the ways. And then, so what this means is this times this is supposed to equal 0. If this times this is equals 0, what do I know about one of these two things? One of these two factors? Right. If something times something equals 0, what has to be true about one of these two? One of them has to be 0. So what x value would make this factor into a 0? Negative 1. Because negative 1 plus 1 is 0. Now negative 1 minus 4 is negative 5, but does that matter? No, because what's 0 times negative 5? 0. Okay, what x value makes this factor 0? Positive 4. You just do the opposite, right? 4 minus 4 is 0. And it doesn't matter what this is, because 0 times whatever is still 0. So it's got two possible answers. Whoops. And we could check those. Negative 1 squared is 1. Negative 3 times negative 1 is 3. 1 plus 3 minus 4 is 0. That works. 4 squared is 16. Minus 3 times 4 is 12. Or 12. 16 minus 12 is 4. Minus 4 is 0. They both work. Okay, so there's two things that actually work. It's not really like the last chapter where if you square both sides, sometimes you get extra answers and you have to check it. You can check it, but it's not a have-to thing. If you factor right, it should be right. Does that make sense? Okay. One more thing. Let's say we took some stuff out, like kind of like the first thing. Remember up here we took stuff out, 3x. So let's say we took some stuff out and we got like 2x minus 1, x plus 3 equals 0. Okay. What x value would make this factor 0?
Negative 3.
Negative 3. Now this is a trickier question. What x value would make this factor a 0?
Not a 0.
Okay, let's do a little experiment here. How do I make 2x minus 1 into 0?
Maybe positive.
1/2. 1/2 would make this into a 0. So, if it just said x minus 1, what would the answer have been?
Negative 1.
No,
Oh, positive 1.
positive 1. But if there's a 2 on front, the answer is no longer positive 1, it's positive 1 over 2. Okay, you get it? So that's only when there's a number on the front does that work. Basically it's always this number, opposite of this number, like the 1 over this number. And what x value would make this factor a 0? Because this is stuff is multiplied to this also. 0. If there's an x on the outside, if I plug in 0 right there, 0 squared is 0, times 2 is 0, times all that stuff is 0. So if there's an x on the outside, 0 is one of your answers. Okie dokie.
A lot of zeros.
0, 0, 0, 0. Well, actually I do have one more thing before we start. What do you think we can do if it's not equal to 0? What do you think we're going to do about that? Like all of my examples up here were all equal to 0, right? Mm-hmm. So what if it's not equal to 0? Because then I need that 0 over there to use that trick. How do I make this 0? I choose x values. So guess what I'm going to do about it? Make it equal to 0. Okay, once you make it equal to 0, then you can use that trick. Factor this. We already did it, but so anyway, if everything's not on one side equal to 0, you got to move everything to one side. Make it equal to 0. All right. Number 1. On number 1, they were very polite and they factored for us. What kind souls. So all we have to do is say what x values would make those factors 0. What x value would make the first factor into a 0? 2. Everybody on the right page? Yeah. Okay, what x value would make the second factor a 0? Negative 4. See how easy that is? So easy. So easy. That'll be like number 1 on the test.
I could do this in my sleep.
Okay, number 3. What z value will make the parentheses 0? Negative 7. What other z value could we plug in?
0.
On the outside, 0. If that outside z is a 0, the whole thing turns into 0. Okay, number 5. So if there's an 8x on the outside, what's one of our answers? 0.
Oh, and one of them is positive 10.
On the second parentheses, what x value would make that a 0? Negative 1. On the third set of parentheses, what x value would make that a 0? 10. Okay, number 7. This is the tricky kind. You guys remember how I did it? Okay, so how do I make, the question is, how do I make 4b plus 1 into 0? What b value would make that 0?
Negative 1.
Negative 1/4. So you just do negative 1 over 4. You guys see how it goes? Instead of just negative 1, it's negative 1 over that, negative 1/4. So on the second parentheses,
That'd be negative
instead
1.
of, if it was b plus 2, what would the answer have been?
Minus
Negative, it would have been minus 2. If it had said b plus 2, it would have been minus 2. But since there's a 3 in front,
Maybe 1 over 2.
it's negative 2 over 3. Yes, negative 2/3.
Very much too.
That helps us.
Number 9, solve by factor. Okay, they're going to make us do it ourselves this time.
Wait, that's the same exact thing as number 6. The second part.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh yeah, 6 and 8 are like number 7. Pretty close. Alright, number 9. Y squared plus 6y plus 9 equals 0. Okay, 3-term factoring, right? So the 2 sets of parentheses. What goes in the front? Y. What multiplies into 9 that adds up to 6? 3 and 3. So what y values would make these factors 0? Negative 3. This is called a double root, which means like a double answer. Doesn't really mean, you guys don't really need to know that yet, actually. Just, there's only one answer in number 9. Unlike most of these. Number 11. X squared minus 9. You guys remember how to factor that? What kind is it? Does it take stuff out? Yeah, it's a square minus a square. They both have square roots. So what goes into x squared? X and x. What goes into negative 9? So what x values would make those factors 0?
Plus 3 minus 3.
Plus or minus 3. Yeah, you guys remember the fast forward way of writing that?
Oh yeah,
Plus or minus 3.
Yeah, that was like the epic way.
13. What do we got? A squared plus 5a. I don't think the AC is on.
Yeah, it's pretty warm.
Pretty toasty. Just think like when your grandparents were kids, actually maybe your great grandparents, they probably didn't have AC at all.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
But we do, so we
Yeah.
deserve to have it on.
My great-great-great-great-grandparents lived in Norway, and then they died. But then their son lived and came over here.
Good story.
Grandfamily history.
Yeah, they came across with a fairy and it like literally like sank. Then some random guy grabbed the baby.
I think you're making stuff up.
No, I'm not even joking about it.
This is
It's like a
great.
strange story about
Your
my
great
parents.
grandparents died on the trip over here.
Yes,
But
and
their
they were
son
immigrants over here, but
survived.
then their son survived because someone randomly just grabbed the baby. It was such a strange
You're not-
story.
I
I'm
don't
not even making
believe
it up.
that.
Also, who told this story?
My great-great-grandma.
She was dead at that.
Wasn't she
Yeah,
dead?
and then she passed it on to her
What?
daughter.
Wait, she
How
passed
did
it
you
on
tell the
after
story
she
of
was
her
dead?
dying?
No, it,
You can't tell the story of you dying.
not that. Okay, quickly enough.
She got raised from the
Her
dead and told the
parents
story.
Basically, like the son, like wasn't there, but then the guy adopted the son.
No.
Okay.
Okay,
anyway.
Grant. Okay.
I did not say it right.
What goes in the front? A times A. What goes into negative 36 that can add up to 5? Plus 9 minus 4. Multiplies to negative 36, adds up to 5. What A values would make these factors 0?
Negative
15, x squared minus x equals 0. Okay, we're in the B section, which means they're going to try to trick us a little bit. How can we factor, they might get us on 15. How can we factor 15?
X on the outside.
You can take an x out. We haven't used that yet today. After I take an x out, what's left?
X minus 1.
Yeah, remember you're dividing an x out. X divided by x is 1, not nothing. What x values would make these factors 0? 1 or 0. 0 times blah, 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 0. 1 or 0. C squared equals 7c. You guys know what's different about this one? It's the first problem that we've done that hasn't said equals 0.
Oh, yeah, we got changed for you.
We need to make it say equals 0 so we can use that 0 trick. So how do I make it say equals 0?
You're all.
I don't think any of the rest do either.
Subtract 7c, I guess.
It's kind of like, when you have x's, when you have x's on both sides of the equation like this, you just subtract 2x on both sides, right? That's kind of the same thing. So just subtract 7c. These don't mix. And now it looks kind of like 15. So what do I need to do? How do I factor that? Take a c out. What's left? What c values make these factors 0? 7, 0. No, 19. X squared minus 10x equals negative 16. Alright, what do you guys think? Plus 16. You gotta get a 0 over here. Get rid of the negative 16. We're gonna add 16. Okay, so that's 3-term factoring, right? The x squared and the x and the constant. So x times x goes in the front. So the question is, what multiplies into 16 that would also add up to negative 10? 2 and 8 multiply to 16. And if you make them both negative, they would add up to negative 2. What x values make these factors 0? 2 or 8. Getting close, getting close. Yeah!
My jaw keeps popping.
Nice screen.
Yeah. Here's the story.
That's why your rubber bands are in there to hold your jaw together so they don't fall apart.
Probably.
I'm bad at saying things out loud. And
Forgot to do
there's
16.
21. 16 is like
Saying that's like where I stopped.
16 is like 15 and 17. 21. What should we do first on? I'm gonna write this one down. What should we do first on 21? Okay, we could technically subtract p squared to put it on the right side and have a 0 over here, but it's probably going to be less confusing if our p squared is positive, so it's probably better if we just bring everything over to the left side. So I'm going to subtract 2p and I'm going to subtract 24, and I'm going to do it all at once. Minus 2p minus 24. Okay, so p and p, and what goes into negative, multiplies into negative 24, somebody besides Isa,
Oh,
and adds up to negative 2.
6, negative
6 and negative 4,
4. 6, negative 6.
negative 6 and 4. 6 and negative 4 would add up to 2, so we need negative 6 and 4. And then what p values would make those factors a 0? Let's see, that was
I didn't show my work on 15, so I kind of forgot how to do 16.
we took stuff out. Number 23.
Oh.
Y squared equals 169.
Yeah, Forrest.
Alright, what do you guys think?
Pick stuff.
No,
Subject.
subtract 169. We gotta get a 0 over here, right?
Yeah.
So I get y squared minus 169. Is that a take stuff out? No.
Square minus square.
Square, probably square minus the square, right?
13.
Anybody know what the square root of 169 is? 13. You guys know what this is gonna factor to?
Wow.
Y and y, positive 13, negative 13. What y values?
Plus,
Plus or minus 13.
That was so weird. No joke. Can I look at this?
Sure. There's 15 and 17. Can't quite fit them. There's 15, mostly like that. Here, is it more like 15 or 17? It's 15. A bonus.
This should be nice. You should make 24 bonus.
30? That looks
This
sufficiently
is
hard.
the old Thompson family lineage.
oh my gosh.
By the way, if you didn't know his name was Bartholomew, which is a very cool name.